Today, friends, you may know is the beginning of Diwali, a 5-day celebration often known as the Festival of Lights. It's celebrated by our Sikh, Hindu, and Jain faiths. We send love to everyone celebrating Diwali today, and we're reminded of our divine interconnectedness, right? Today's lectionary reading just happens to be about lamps and light. The word Diwali comes from the Sanskrit word Deepavali, which means rows of lighted lamps. As the story goes, homes and streets are decorated with small oil lamps called diyas, the light supposed to help Lakshmi, goddess of wealth and good fortune, find her way into people's homes. Our lives are shaped by stories, just like Jackie mentioned. Stories like Lakshmi. Stories like the 10 bridesmaids. Stories are powerful. They can harm, they can heal. In today's story, we read that the kingdom of heaven is like 10 sleepy bridesmaids, half of whom have oil, half who don't, the latter half being left out of the party. Now, if you've been around Middle very long, you know that one of the things that we value is the opportunity to critically engage our holy texts. Moreover, the stories that end up defining our values. We read our text with hermeneutics or lenses of curiosity and suspicion. Today's parable is no different. In the Gospel of Matthew, there are 104 parables, out of which there are 85 characters mentioned. 73 of them are men. That leaves 12 women, 10 of them are these sleepy bridesmaids. The underrepresentation of women is of no question, and we shouldn't ever forget it. Our story is biased from the outset. We're given a rigid dichotomy, aren't we? Wise versus foolish. And understandably, we are persuaded to have a bias for the wise. The foolish have little hope to redeem themselves from the beginning, and the wise have actually done nothing for us to revere them. A common tool of white supremacy is to pit us against each other, just as these women are pitted against each other. I'm feeling that right now. Is anybody else? Friends, the majority of humans, if asked, would say that we want peace, an end to bombing and the death of children. But we are pitted against each other in harmful ways that keep us from achieving ultimate goals of peace, freedom, equality, compassion. We're divided by labels, the media, biases, even and particularly stories of our faiths. We continue with this parable with a hermeneutic of suspicion. Where's the bride in the story? Why don't the bridesmaids have any voice? And when they do talk, it's like they're talking as a group of 5. Can we have? No, you can't have. The young women have no control over when the groom will arrive, nor are any of them given agency to stay awake or to assume leadership. Some interpretations think that the reason that the groom is late is because of negotiations over selling the bride. The sexism is uncomfortable. Why didn't the 5 foolish ones come with oil for their lamp? Was there an issue with resources, finances, access? Why, in the middle of the night, when they asked the other 5 for some of their oil, were they not only not shared with, but instructed to go all the way to the market? Why not go to another friend's house, another family member's house? The lack of solidarity and access in this story is uncomfortable. This is often told as a story about the end of time. If you grew up with this story, did you understand it that way? Did you hear it that way? I certainly did. The wedding banquet is heaven. The groom is Jesus. Stay awake and be prepared, for we don't know when Jesus is going to return, but we sure don't want to miss it, and we sure don't want to be ill-prepared. The eschatological nature of this is uncomfortable. What I mean by that is the focus on our final destiny is uncomfortable. If we forget our oil, if we don't have enough, if somebody doesn't share with us, if we have to walk too far, we get shut out of heaven? Where's the grace here? Friends, this story is uncomfortable. But we're not going to throw it out. It's part of the larger story of our faith, which is a story of how we are to be human. And as such, this uncomfortable story, being that it's actually part of the story, is its own kind of soothing, right? Because life is uncomfortable. There's no denying that. Kate Bowler says it well, there is no cure for being human. How many of us are uncomfortable that hundreds of hostages are still in captivity? How many of us are uncomfortable with escalating violence in Gaza? Uncomfortable with terrorism, anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, classism, homophobia. Uncomfortable with a relationship, an untimely death. Uncomfortable in your own body, restless in your spirit. Discomfort certainly abounds in our holy texts and today. The question is not, will it be uncomfortable? The question is, so what? So what will we do? Are we going to get stuck, get angry, shut down, give up? Our story gives us some insight as to what we might do with discomfort. Though, as we noted, most modern-day interpretations of this parable focus on the end times, on our destiny. Where does the bulk of the story happen? It happens before the closed door, right? It's a story about what happens in a world that waits. A world where we don't all have, whether by our own omission or by systems of oppression, where we don't all have what we need. A world where the players, that's us, get tired and we fall asleep. So perhaps a good word for us today is this. In this messy, uncomfortable, not fully liberated world where we stand, the door is not yet shut. That actually means possibility and opportunity. Our discomfort with this passage can be activated as a refusal to accept closed doors, especially doors shut to the vulnerable and the oppressed. Our discomfort can be activated with a fierce determination to keep pushing, keep showing up, keep believing that we actually are all welcome to the party that is both this life and the next. Let's don't focus on how to prepare for the end times. Let's talk about these times. We have a lot to do. The gospel spiritual sung by enslaved African Americans, "Keep your lamps trimmed and burning," of course, comes from this parable. And it's also not a spiritual about Christ's return, but it focuses on what to do in the meantime. As the chorus repeats, "Children, don't grow weary. Children, don't grow weary. Children, don't grow weary." Children, don't grow weary because God is continually breaking into our lives, just like she did in this story. Did you notice it? At midnight, there was a shout. Look, here's the bridegroom. Come out and meet him. Who said that? The story doesn't tell us, but it's often attributed to in art as a hovering angel, a hovering God, disrupting us with a clarion call that the banquet has already begun. God breaks into our midst every day. God comes back every day. God is in us. We are little gods. In fact, God has never left us. So no, we don't know how these wars are going to end. We don't know when the hostages will be released, when Palestine will be free, when all people will be free. We don't know how the mother's grief will end, hovering over a deceased or lost child. But we have the opportunity to do something different. What if, friends, our discomfort dares us to dream bigger, believe more profoundly, and cling to love and justice more fiercely? We aren't wise, any of us. My shirt, in case you're wondering, says, I don't know. We aren't wise, any of us, because we have it all figured out. We are wise by sticking it out and trusting that God is sticking it out, figuring it out with us. We are wise by remembering that love and justice are our North Stars. They are our final words and our paths. How will we hold the discomfort? How will we stay alert to God's presence breaking through the discord every day? It's possible that the failure of the young girls isn't that they fell asleep, but that they didn't stick around. That they didn't stick around and muddle through it, looking around with intentional eyes and ears and new hopes for liberation. Now, that kind of living is a shift away from a culture that's hell-bent on saturation, empty platitudes, rhetorical how are yous, repressed feelings. That kind of living is soul shifting, spirit shifting, consciousness raising. It's moving through life differently, grieving intentionally, listening, waiting intentionally, holding space for things that we love with intention. I'm going to tell you a story now that I tell with permission. One of my 9-year-olds loves riding his bike. Any friends here that love riding bikes? Any age? Any bike riders? Yeah, I see some all around. On the last day of summer, he rode his bike so hard the handlebars popped off. Totally popped off. There was clearly no repairing the bike, so he and his dad had some moments with it in the East River field, took a few pictures, then laid it by the trash can and said a sad goodbye. That evening, my son let me know he wanted to take a walk. I really cherish any one-on-one time with my kids, so I gladly obliged. Where to? I asked. The East River, he said. I wasn't quite ready to say goodbye to my bike. So we made our way back to the trash can, his broken bike laying precariously beside it. He requested more pictures. We took several. Per his lead, we sat and recalled best times about the bike. Purchasing it during the early months of the pandemic, learning to ride it in a field in Kentucky, riding it down Flatbush Avenue for Breonna Taylor, around Foley Square for abortion, ditching it to jump in the Washington Square Park after the Pride Parade, strapping it on a roof of a van for road trips, riding through puddles. We laughed and shared stories. And I began to realize that I was witnessing something transcendent. Next, he stood up and started walking. He made 3 circles around the bike and the trash can. Not talking, just circling. I knew better than to speak. Mom, I'm really sad about my bike, he said after completing the 3rd loop. I know, buddy. I'm sad too, I said. Then he sprinted over to the nearby swings. And we swang. And we swang and we swang. Our silence was enhanced by the dusk falling over the East River. And I knew we weren't swinging. We were grieving and processing and feeling. It was beautiful. But we're not comfortable doing that often, are we? We're really not comfortable being uncomfortable. Fellow white people, we don't like to talk about race because white supremacy allows us to think we don't have to, and therefore we succumb to harmful ease. Christians don't like to talk about the role religion, including Christian hegemony, has in perpetuating violence. Americans don't like to talk about this country is far from perfect and never has been. We don't like being uncomfortable. And yet, look at what that space might allow. Who might we become the opposite side of swinging? Who do we become the other side of storytelling, of lamenting, of grieving, of remembering? And who do we risk not becoming if we rush through being human? This is a difficult time. I have had many conversations with Israeli, Jewish, Palestinian, Muslim, Black friends who are hurting, feeling unheard, unseen, misunderstood, uncomfortable. But my hope today is this, that we don't give up on the discomfort. We don't write it out of our stories, but that we believe that something will emerge that will continue to teach us how to be human. That we use our discomfort to get in tune with ourselves, our spirits, that will then show us also abounding, interlocking systems of injustice. That we use our discomfort to ask better questions, search for better ways. What's that gonna look like? Recalling memories, having your own prayer walk, swinging in sadness. I don't know, but I bet you know. And I hope you make some time for it. This is also a sermon for myself. I hope we can go against a culture that tells us just to push through and act like it's okay. I hope we can remember that there is opportunity because we are still on this side of the door. And this could be, should be, heaven on earth. Every day we have the opportunity to actively wait, to be in tune with ourselves and our sadness enough to do what we need to do to wade through it. And while we do that, let's don't forget that God flourishes while we wait. God has never left us. God shows up in children, reminding us what it looks like to live, to name our grief. This parable ends rather abruptly. We're inclined to think that the Lord has the final word, but we don't know that for sure. And I actually think that all 10 of the young women eventually got into that party. Well, Mother, don't you stop praying. Father, keep right on praying. Keep your lamps trimmed and burning. Keep your lamps trimmed and burning. Keep your lamps trimmed and burning. For this old world is almost done. Amen. Amen.